Hey guys, welcome back to Team Death Slinger. My name is Peter, and today we're going to be talking about the ban list coming up towards the end of August. We're going to use the stats tool that I developed to try and figure out what cards should be hit. Some of it will be opinion-based. Not everything can be backed up by data. There's some contextual information that has to be considered, so do remember that data doesn't necessarily tell the whole story sometimes. So we're going to start with a terms guide here. I'm realizing my webcam cuts off some of that, but I will obviously read this to you because there's a lot of terms that are in these images I'm going to show you that might not be intuitive as to what they mean. So we have our representation percentage. This represents the decks played in since release and the total decks played since release. So if, for example, a deck has been played in 3 decks since the card was released, and there have been 10 decks played since the card was released, your representation percentage is going to be 30%. This gives a percentage of people that are playing the card since release. Usually it's bad if older cards have a high percentage because it means people are not playing new cards. They've been playing older cards and are still playing older cards since its release. And we expect newer cards to have a higher percentage because ideally, new cards should be good. Good cards get played more. There's been less decks played since the release, so that percentage will naturally trend higher. There's competitive and regionals. This means tournament level deck lists only. There's casual, which means locals and webcam tournament level decks. Think Eagle's Nest. And then we have some graphs. You're going to see the labels on those are going to be usage over time, which is the number of copies run by format. Representation by format. This is the number of decks playing the card in a format. The representation as a percentage, this is the percentage of that format that is currently playing the card. So if a card has a 20% representation as a percentage, that means that 20% of the meta in that format is playing the card. Average copies per deck, this is just the average number of copies played by format. It'll be 1 to 4. And the data has been compiled from various online resources with statistics and visualizations produced through my own application. Just my way of saying these numbers are not stolen from anyone. I have gathered publicly available information and done math with it to give you some numbers and draw some conclusions. So, with that out of the way, this is our context. This is an image detailing the top 25 highest represented cards alongside the 25 most used cards by quantity. As we said, recently released powerful cards will naturally be skewed towards higher percentages, so we want to keep an eye on older cards with high percentages or new cards with very high percentages. And to the best of my knowledge, this is kind of how I break down the percentages in my head. 0 to 15% is either no usage to a strong card as you get closer to 15% in a specific archetype. 15 to 20%, we're looking at cards that are quite strong for an archetype or just strong generically. You can use them in multiple decks, so they crop up in a lot of deck lists. And then 20% plus, to me, indicates there might be a problem with the card. It might be too usable, too generic. There might be several decks that are abusing the card over the course of its lifetime. And the reason I'm showing you this is so that we can build some context when we talk about cards on this, not necessarily this list, but cards that should be hit, so you know what these representation values actually mean. And I'm not going to quite go over this. You can take a look at it in your own time. It's very interesting, in my opinion. So, with that said, my first card on my list here, Medieval Gallantmon. I'm going to preface and say Bandai's not going to hit this card. There's no way it's going to be hit, but I think it's a problem. And I think there are numbers that back up the fact that this card is a problem. First of all, if I can draw your attention to the bottom right there is a little blurb there that says average representation percentage at regionals. That is a 45% value. 45% representation is absolutely absurd. That means 45% of decks played in regionals since this card came out are running at least one copy of Medieval Gallantmon. That's absurd. The casual rate is lower. I want to point out that's probably because of the price of the card. If people are playing casually, they're playing at webcam, they're playing at their locals, they might not want to shell out $80 to $90 for a copy of Medieval Gallantmon if they can make do without it. The low average copies used suggests that restricting this card would probably be ineffective. We can see on that graph there, we are over 1, but not quite at 2. We actually have the average there on the side is 1.58 copies run. We can round that up to 2 because obviously you can't run half a copy of a card in a deck. But we can say you're either running 1 or 2 copies of this card, and I think if you're running 1 or 2 copies of this card in a regionals, restricting it to 1 doesn't help. In my perfect world, I would just ban this card. I think it's a problem. Way too much representation. This is largely a tribal card game at this point, and having a generic staple that just absolutely cucks basically anything that wants to play anything on play and just gets to slam itself down for 7. It's just quite good. So my recommendation would be to ban it, but obviously that will not happen. Another card I want to point out here, BT16 UK Mod. This has a 32% representation rate from BT16, and I think that's quite high still. It likely also suffers from inflated usage rates from its original release in BT16. This card had really, really high usage, EX6 really high usage. but it has come down since then. This card's not currently being abused. We've seen that a good rookie rush strategy will absolutely skyrocket the viability of this card. Think red hybrids. Think the Numemon meta that we all suffered through for a while there. Because the card just provides search power, tempo, and enables every tamer-reliant aggro strategy. If you're looking for pieces and you want to hit things hard and fast, you're running Ugomon. If you're running a bunch of colors and you need to gap the bridge in terms of search potential, you're running Ugomon like Galaxy. And I think that just kind of makes this card a catalyst that enables really problematic strategies to get that one notch over the top that they need in terms of consistency and being really annoying to play against. Our average copies run here between 3 to 4. I think just restricting this to 1 is perfectly viable, a good way to curb its power, and you'll certainly see that its representation drops down as you're not going to get the consistency you want out of this when this and the promo Ukomon are restricted to 1. So that's where I'm at with this card. Do I think this is going to get hit? Probably not. I would say Bandai's probably not going to, but based on the numbers, I do think that it probably should be. Groman X here. This is our main offender. This is what everyone's unhappy about. It's got a 24% usage rate, which is kind of pretty normal for a newer, more powerful card. It is above that 20% threshold that I said there might be a problem when we're looking at, and that's why we're looking at it. So the problematic part of this card, I think, is that the number of strategies this card's being used in is just too high. It's playable in Magidramon, obviously. I've seen Leviamon decks that run this under a Cerberusmon package and then just go Leviamon control on the top end. It gets played in Phoenixmon. There's a whole Growlmon Rush deck that you can run now. And most people run 4 copies of the card, which means restriction is a perfectly viable way to curb this card's efficacy. So restricting it to 1 should be perfectly fine. I also want to point out, I'm just realizing I didn't say it earlier, but these graphs do include EX9 and BT22, and it makes a lot of these cards look like they're just falling way off in terms of usage. But we don't have any actual regionals for BT22 as of the time of recording this, and there is, I think, 1 locals data set in the BT22 data set. So BT22 is on here, and we don't actually have that many deck lists from EX9. Which is why the overall quantity that you see there is so much lower in terms of EX9 and BT22. So you can kind of look from EX9 to the left to get a better idea of what these numbers look like. So with that being said, though, I think recommended action on this card is just going to be restricting it to 1. It's just got a little bit too much flexibility, a little bit too much usage, especially when paired with some of the other problematic pieces in its package being used in a couple of other decks. Gravity Crush, the repeat offender. He's got low usage rate, but recently has spiked in play alongside Groman X strategies. I do also want to point out that if we look at his competitive representation as a percent graph, the third one down on the left there, we can see that he has had some varying levels of usage throughout the meta. I think anytime a good aggro red strategy is viable, this card sees more play. There's no downside to this card if you can win the turn you dump all your Grav Crushes. And near 30% representation in recent formats is very overbearing. If we look at that competitive representation graph that I pointed out earlier, in the BT21 and EX9 meta, we're real close to 30% there. And that is just, that's too much in my opinion. The average copies being run in competitive rounds down to 2. We're at 2.38. People are probably running 2 copies of this card. There's a couple of people running 3 now as the card has gotten more and more play in the meta. But I think you can still high roll with this card at 1. I think you only need to find the 1 copy. Groman X gives you the when Digivolving, draw 1, trash 1. You're going to be cycling cards when you're playing a combo that wants to push with Grav Crush. And I think because of that, you probably just need to ban the card, get it out of here. It's just, you're going to high roll into winning the game with it, and you win the game off a 1-up. Nobody really likes that, so might as well just get rid of it and let this stop being a repeat offender that is a problem every time there's a good red strategy. Moving on to Royal Knights here. Kind of a hard deck to hit because it's a soup deck. There's a lot of really strong on-play effects that Royal Knights gets access to. They're just slamming bodies that do good things, building value until they eventually push in and beat you. However, Royal Knights of the Purge enables Rush Omnimon X, which is a really strong combination. Just plopping that guy down and then swinging with him is kind of brutal. Reducing the deck's ability to slam what should be a boss monster with Rush for free should combat the oppressive nature of Royal Knights, and the deck still has plenty of tools to function, in my opinion. You are a deck loaded with impactful on-plays, and I think you're just going to be better off in terms of health of the meta if you can't just play the strongest card that's supposed to be a boss monster in like a bunch of other decks and then just swing and rush with it, clear the opponent's board. You know, it's just kind of a problematic combination, and I think we can see the rise in Royal Knights from these competitive representation graphs The deck's being played, it's really good. And I think this is the piece to hit while not entirely killing the deck. Restricting it to 1 should be fine. Average copies run is at 4. This is going to enable you to still get off maybe 1 board clear or really, really nasty attack with the Royal Knights of the Purge. But you're not going to be able to do it consistently, do it over and over again. You're probably going to be saving it for your win the game turn, as I think it was intended for. Protoform is on this list for me because of the numbers specifically. So this is not incredibly oppressive at the moment, but it does retain a 19% usage rate since its release in EX5. This is, in terms of set releases now, this is getting up there in age. And 19% is relatively high for a card that released in EX5, and it suggests that this card is an enabler for problematic strategies. If you have good X-Antibody cards, you are probably running Protoform, and I think all it takes for this card to kind of be over the top is a good card that can abuse it, and it's going to see high highs because of Protoform. This card is typically run at 2 copies. I think if you restrict it to 1, halving its ability to be played. It's not searchable because it is white unless you play one of the few X-Antibody cards that can search X-Antibody cards. But I think playing it at 1 is probably enough to curb its usability in terms of enabling some really problematic strategies that could crop up in the future. You could say it's unfair to restrict it because it could be problematic in the future, but I think that 19% representation rate in regionals is just kind of emblematic of the fact that there's always something that's using this. And I think once we get that really strong X-Antibody card, people are going to have to take a look at this card and decide if it's okay to exist moving forward. Another card on my list, BT17 Talon. Really low representation rate at the moment. If you actually looked at the numbers here, you would say, wow, you're kind of crazy. But again, taking into consideration that EX9 and BT22 are not necessarily accurate, they're low because of the low numbers that we have in terms of data. BT21 quite high, 300 copies of the card run. In my opinion, this is the main offender for Sukuyamon level 7 spam with Ruin Mode and Balder Arm. It enables generic option use that racks up value through scrambles and trainings because this card is not limited to just using plugins. It lets you use any yellow option from your hand with the cost reduced by 2. And restricting this card forces Sukuyamon players to use plugins or risk the overflow on Talmon Ace. I know that you're probably running Talmon Ace anyways, but the Ace inheritable is also worse. Instead of having a full level 5 lineup that lets you spam options, and then this one specifically that lets you further spam options whenever you attack, especially in an archetype that can unsuspend if it wants to go that route. It's just generating a lot of value for the deck, and I think restricting this guy to 1 will do a lot for you. The average copies run being 4, it's just certainly, I think, an effective way to curb the rampant option spam that enables those level 7 strategies, rather than trying to say that we should ban out the level 7s that are rarely being abused. I think we should just curb the Talmon, let the deck still exist in a slightly less effective manner, and then see where it goes from there. Another card on my list here, Scio and Co. This one I don't necessarily know or think will happen, but it's not good competitively. The data here just completely shows this is not necessarily a playable card in competitive or in casual, but there have been several infinite loops discovered involving this card. I know East just put out a video talking about another infinite loop that was discovered with the Scio and Co. This, I believe, does have the ban pairing with Keen and Crier. And at this point, I think it's just better to ban it and give us a Co retrain that enables DNA for Grace Novamon without enabling generic shenanigans. We already got the Scio retrain. Give us the Co independent tamer. Let it do something that enables the Night Fang, Light Fang, Nightclaw DNA shenanigans, just without any of the generics attached to it, so that you can actually, play the archetype the way it was supposed to be played without causing issues. So with that being said, that's it for my suggestions on bans and restrictions, but I want to talk about freeing some of my children here, cards on the ban list that I think should come off. So we have Groman X from BT11. We have a tamer now that's just going to give protection when you change attack targets. This is going to add a little bit more situational protection to the Groman archetype. And quite frankly, I think with all the protection roaming around, that this isn't even the most oppressive card in terms of protection. I know it's the cost reduction that is really, really nasty on this card. But a lot of decks go burr. They go burr real fast, and they go faster than a lot of other decks in the meta. I don't even think Groman X is that egregious in today's meta. Let him free. Gabumon from BT2 on deletion, draw 2 and trash 1. I mean, scatter mode is on the list. He's probably on the list forever. Just let Gabumon run free. I mean, I don't think it's that egregious anymore. There's lots of ways to cycle cards, lots of ways to find your pieces in the trash for that matter. So you can either just build trash without drawing cards and then find the pieces you need in the trash and grab them, or draw cards other ways. I just think that this one probably doesn't need to be on here anymore. Jet Sylphimon, let's be real, this is just recovering you 1. It's not that crazy anymore. You can let her free. And then Doru Greymon. This card used to be really impressive. It had great protection on top of the security attack +1. Again, I still think there's just crazier cards nowadays. I think this could probably walk free. and be fine. I'm assuming you probably wouldn't play it in the Chronicle deck anyways, which means you're playing this in a more generic Alphamon or Dorgoromon deck, and I think that's probably fine, to be honest with you. So, with all that said, thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Anything you want to point out, anything you want to say about the ban list, I'm all ears, would love to hear it. Just make sure to be nice and respect each other in the comments. I know ban lists are a touchy subject for a lot of people, and it goes a long way to show other people kindness, even if you don't agree with what they think about the card game that we all play as a hobby. So, thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Thank you to our channel members for supporting this channel. It's people like Langlong, Big Z11, Coffee Deus, and Digidane who make videos like this possible.